Welcome home. We are WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into another week of preseason football where bad things can happen in games, in practices, all sorts of places. Luke Jones will be out in Owens Mills. All of it brought to you by our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care, as well as Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. We're going to be bringing the Gold Rush Sevens doublers down to Fadley's next Friday for the Cheat Stros. We're continuing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by Liberty Pure Solutions and our friends getting us crystal clear water. I wish I had my purple colored glasses out. I don't this week. We have baseball going on, so I used to have my orange colored glasses out. And I will have the Ravens scratch offs to give away when we get together next month. We begin on the 4th of September. Will be at Coco's, and then the Oyster Tour begins on the 5th. And I know something special that happens on the 5th of September. For at least 5 minutes, we won't be talking about the Orioles bullpen or Brandon Hyde's managerial decisions or whether we're hitting the ball or not. All eyes will be on the football field. Luke, just trying to get the horses to the course, and it's always like this, especially in early August. It's, where's Linderbaum? He's not good. Oh, my God, Kyle Hamilton. I hope it's soft tissue. You know, all the things that Harbaugh would say. But even where these guys aren't tackling to the ground and doing all this stuff, they play these crazy preseason games. Guys get hurt, and you just got to hope it's not Kyle Hamilton, man.
Yeah, scary weekend. I mean, it started with Friday night where Nate Wiggins was easily the biggest standout performance, the most encouraging, exciting development on a night when you rested most of your starters. And that wasn't surprising. That was the expectation. But Wiggins breaks up 3 passes on the first drive of the game. Looks the part. I mean, you're saying, man, I mean, how are they going to keep this kid off the field for very long? And then he hurts his shoulder early in the second half. Good news, minor. Doesn't sound like week 1 will be in jeopardy whatsoever, but it's a reminder of just how unsettling it can be. And I mean, I saw some people criticizing the fact that he was playing early in the second half, and I'll hear that to a point. At the same time, he's a rookie, and you want to see what he can do, right? So, but the good news is, sounds like just a minor AC joint sprain. He'll probably miss some time, but doesn't sound like he'll be, missing too much time or in jeopardy of missing week 1. But on Sunday, scary moment for the Ravens. Kyle Hamilton kind of pulls up as he's playing the ball in an 11-on-11 drill, goes down. I didn't see exactly, the mechanism as far as whether the knee buckled or anything like that, but saw him down holding his left leg. We think the knee, to the point where he limped off, and John Harbaugh went over to the sideline. Lamar Jackson and Isaiah Likely went over to the sideline. And Nestor, you went to training camp over the years enough. When you have a major player go down, even if it's a scare, and it ended up being a scare for Kyle Hamilton, sounds like, there's no concerns about the stability of the knee or anything like that. But when that happens, it sucks all the air and life out of the crowd. I mean, it got quiet.
Oh, dude, let me tell you what,
moments.
with the preseason game, because I was watching the Orioles on Friday and like all this stuff was going on. Dude, the Wiggins thing, the minute he came off the field, I saw he was low-fiving people with a left arm. And I said to my wife, I'm like, and I don't want to be too macabre about this, because when my wife was diagnosed with cancer, I like was freaked out, and I mistakenly referred to her doctor as the Grim Reaper who came in the room. But when Leanne Curl shows up, it's never good, right? You know what I mean? And I would think the same thing is true of practice, is sort of like when they see Leanne show up, or when they see a primary doctor. In the old days, Andy Tucker was also one of those guys who famously in the Billick era. When that happens, all the other players, there's a hush for everybody, right? I mean, you know the difference between the doctor showing up and not.
Yeah, there is. But the good news with Hamilton, he was able to get up off the field, limp to the sideline. He ultimately walked in without assistance. Now, he did have a little bit of a limp, but John Harbaugh said after practice that structurally it seems stable. Obviously, as you know, the first thing you think when a guy's grabbing his knee is ACL, right? But looks like it'll be okay. I'm guessing he'll miss a little bit of practice time. I mean, it's Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton doesn't necessarily need to be on the field every day over the next 3.5 weeks as we're leading into week 1, especially if he's, whatever the issue was. But these are just those reminders, and the Ravens, the secondary is an area where they have depth compared to some other position groups. But, they already lost Arthur Millette for the start of the season with arthroscopic knee surgery. He's going to miss at least the first couple games, if not a little bit more time than that. But, I mean, Kyle Hamilton, he's right there with, if you want to say Roquan Smith is still the best player on their defense, I'll hear that. But I think it's at least 1 and 1A at this point with Kyle Hamilton. And I think Kyle Hamilton, from a transcendent play, versatility, productivity, the fact that he's still so young, he's going to be the best player on this defense for a long time. And that's even if Roquan still remains the heart and soul in terms of like the leader, so to speak. But Hamilton is so
when you
good.
say for a long time, that's strong. You're not
he's
a guy
got to stay healthy,
right?
But yeah, I mean,
but to your point, he's you feel like he's an is, not a might be, and he's a guy they're going to keep here in this. Given it's football, it's not baseball. Baseball, we'll have that conversation about who's staying and who's going. In the case of when you have players like that, they stay.
I mean, obviously, this applies for any young player. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to show he can do it for the long haul. But I was even talking to someone in the organization just a couple of days ago, and we were just kind of talking, not anything earth shattering, just kind of talking about the roster. And I made this point, and I don't say that you just said it. So I'm not even, I'm not blowing my own horn here, but I'm not someone who likes to offer the hot takes that you'll see on the talking head shows and all that. That's the last thing that I want to be. I don't want to be that. But I look at Kyle Hamilton and what he already is 2 years into his career, the size, the speed, the physicality, the mental makeup that by all accounts is impressive. You hear him speak to the media, it's impressive. You see him interact with his teammates, it's impressive. He handles himself like he's 30 years old, and he's still 23, I guess. I don't say this lightly. I think he has the potential. I think he has the ability. I think he has the upside to be in that next tier right below Ray Lewis and Ed Reed as far as the best defensive players in the history of the franchise. And I think he has some intangibles that put him over other players in this organization who are in the Ring of Honor or are guys that are potentially going to be in the Hall of Fame. That's how highly I think of Kyle Hamilton. So yeah, when he goes down on Sunday and he's holding his leg, that's a scary moment. That's a season altering kind of injury if it's serious. But the good news, all indications, early indications, and they were going to, go run tests and all that just to be sure. But the early indications were that he's going to be okay. I'm not expecting him to be on the practice field the next day or two necessarily, but I think he'll be okay. And it's just a reminder, the only major headlines this time of year for your football team are bad ones. I mean, well, yes, we'll talk about, the backup quarterback situation or what you did or didn't see from the offensive line, some good, some bad there, still some TBD in terms of the starters. And, we already mentioned Nate Wiggins and what he looked like, but, you see Kyle Hamilton go to the ground and holding his leg, even if just for a few moments, boy, that sucks the air out of the crowd. And it really did it was eerie, Nestor. The crowd got quiet. They play music during practice. The music stopped. It was very much like hey, this is not good. Fortunately, again, he was able to walk off, albeit a little bit of a limp. But John Harbaugh, the early prognosis was that he did not suffer any kind of major injury. So we'll see how it plays out. But boy, Kyle Hamilton is on that very short list. It's Lamar Jackson and then a significant drop off to anyone else. But Roquan Smith, Justin Madubuike, Kyle Hamilton, not even Mark Andrews anymore because you have Isaiah Likely, right? Zay Flowers, I would put into that category, though. I mean, it's a short list of guys where you lose someone and you say, oh, no. Tyler Linderbaum, I'd put into that category at this point. But Kyle Hamilton certainly in that group. But again, fortunate that it appears he dodged a major injury bullet. But it was dicey there for a few moments as you're seeing him holding his knee and trainers running out to see how he's doing.
Well, dicey for Wiggins too,
sure.
in the framework of the game. And I mentioned Leanne Curl and his value to the defense and what they want him to do and what they expect him to do. On that front, let's talk about the game, even though we don't want to at all. I mean, the observations would be he flashed in the way you wanted to flash. Then he got hurt, that's the best and the worst thing, right? You put him out there to see him flash because he's your first round pick and he's your bright, shiny object, like Kyle Hamilton was 2 years ago, right? What else? What do you see? What I always see in these electronic magnet games of preseason where you're trying to figure out how to pronounce guys' names and who's what doing what, especially in the second half. God bless Rob Woodson and Jerry Sandusky for that effort, and Evan Washburn. But for me, putting guys out there with opposites, and I mean not starters, where you're like, all right, some of our wide receivers are going to go in some sets. Some of our offensive linemen are going to play the whole day, but not next to the guy that they practice next to, if it's Stanley or if it's Linderbaum. So we're not going to get any vibe on that. Everybody's going to be measured by their job in this vanilla scheme with a backup quarterback, with certain backup parts, playing against other backup parts, some of which are, you see the Bengals in preseason, they go full on or whatever. Mike Tomlin, some guys sort of play some starters. We're not playing those teams, I don't think. I don't know what we're going to get from the Falcons this weekend. You tell me. But it's so weird a couple of days later to sort of look at it as anything other than, oh my God, is Wiggins okay?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you're always looking for individual standouts, right? I mean, that's really the best way to look at it. Because I would even say, if you're trying to evaluate, say, like, let's just use the edge rushers for an example, right? Owe sat out. Kyle Van Noy sat out. David Ajabo was held out. He's not fully cleared for live game action yet, although he's been practicing. I think he's really close. But, he's coming back from ACL surgery. So for me, I look at someone like a Tavius Robinson, who played last year but didn't play a whole lot for them. And hey, you're looking for, beyond Owe and Van Noy, it's wide open for edge snaps at this point. I mean, you have a rotation typically of at least 4, if not 5 guys. So there are snaps there to be won. So when I see someone like Tavius Robinson, I'd like to see him jump and stand out against when you're going up against other backups. And I didn't really see that. But that's the example you're looking for. In the case of Wiggins, of course, he wasn't matched up against A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, even Paris Campbell, their number 3 wide receiver in Philadelphia. But he still looked the part. Sticky in coverage, aggressive. That's what you want to see. Yeah, that's what a first-round pick should look like in that setting, going up against backup players. But, beyond the Wiggins injury concern, Nestor, I'm just going to go position by position. I'll give you a thumbnail for everything I saw. And then we'll forget about it because it's not all that important because it's a preseason game, to your point. But backup quarterback situation, I've been saying this. I don't love Josh Johnson as the backup. You know me, Nestor. Philosophically, I am not someone that believes in investing major resources in your backup quarterback position, because if you lose your franchise quarterback and you have a legitimate franchise quarterback, you're screwed. I mean, you just are, for lack of a better term. And, Tom Moore famously talked about that with Indianapolis and Peyton Manning when he was asked, why don't you give the reps to the backup? And you say, look, if number 18 goes down, we're bleeped, and we don't practice being bleeped around here. And that, I kind of get that. Look, if Ryan Tannehill wants to come in and take a really cheap deal to be the backup and be an upgrade over Josh Johnson, I'll hear that. But I'm not going to go spend $6 million on a backup quarterback. I'm just not. I'll roll the dice that Lamar stays healthy, and if he gets hurt for a game or two, I'll live with whatever the result is. And if he's hurt for more than that, your season's probably cooked anyway. So that's where they are at quarterback. I think Josh Johnson's limited. Leary didn't show a whole lot. Running back, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I think it's very evident. Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, overwhelming, going to have the carries. Henry with the obvious lion's share. Justice Hill will get some change of pace touches. I'm not sure there's a third running back right now that's going to get any touches. But of the number 3 running back candidates that played Friday night, thought Owen Wright looked much better than Rasheen Ali, the 5th round pick. Owen Wright was on the practice squad last year, showed more juice. He started. I thought that was telling as well. I think he's the leader in the clubhouse for the number 3 spot. Again, I don't think that's very consequential. Wide receivers, Zay Flowers didn't play, of course. Bateman didn't play, of course. Aguilar didn't play, of course. Didn't see a whole lot. And I've kind of been saying that Devontae Walker, their 4th-round pick.
How do you see anything in the passing game when you don't have your quarterback?
And that's the thing. I mean, to me, it was a give take. I don't think it was a lot from Josh Johnson. On the flip side, I don't think the receivers did a whole lot to help him out. Tylan Wallace to me made the best play of the game for a wide receiver on that back shoulder throw. And Tylan Wallace is a special teams guy, right? So I think his roster spot feels pretty secure. I will note that they've added Russell Gage and Anthony Miller, 2 veteran wide receivers over the last week. To me, that's an indication that they don't love their young wide receivers, that they were hoping maybe these guys would push to be the number 4, number 5, number 6 wide receiver. And I just, Devontae Walker will make the team as a 4th-round pick, and I think he can develop into something. But if you're asking me yes or no, is he going to make an impact in 2024? I'm going to say no right now, just based on what I've seen. And based on the fact that the Ravens don't use wide receivers much beyond the top 2 or 3 guys on the depth chart. So I think that's where they are. Tight end, I think that room's pretty settled, right? I think Kadir Ismail's been a nice story, Kadri's son in camp. I think he's got a chance to maybe be on the practice squad, but their top 3 tight ends are decided. Ricard is the fullback / blocking tight end. O-line, I think good things from Roger Rosengarten. I'm starting to think he's improved his chances of being the week 1 guy. I don't think McCary's out of the conversation yet by any stretch. But I think we know long-term where the Ravens want to go there. They want Rosengarten to be that guy. That doesn't mean he's going to be above average or even average.
Why wouldn't McCary be a starting guard?
Guard, he's not really physical enough. I think McCary, and it's interesting. I know it sounds interesting saying that because we came to know Patrick McCary when he replaced Matt Skura in 19, right?
Sure, in that Rams game where they kicked everybody's ass. Yeah.
But I think when you look at McCary, I think, first of all, it's funny because I've used this comparison. It's like the school district has a substitute teacher that they love because they can teach any grade level and they can come in on a moment's notice and do a solid job in that role.
Well, it's like the Orioles with Suarez. Thinking
right, exactly. And they're never your plan A, but they're a really good plan B just about anywhere. And I think that's still where they want McCary to be. I do know from talking to people over the years, there's concern about his back if he would be a starting player every week, week in and week out. His back, he's got to manage. Like, it's not, I don't think it's not something where he needs surgery, but it's just he's got a cranky back. Anyone can relate to that who has
hello.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is there's maintenance there, and I think they feel ideally they'd love to keep him as the 6th man, right? The guy that can back up any position on the offensive line at a moment's notice, carries so much game day value. Do I think McCary could still end up being the starting right tackle to open the year? Sure. I'm not ready to hand the job to Rosengarten, but I thought Rosengarten played pretty well. In fact, I thought he played better than Voorhees at left guard. I thought he looked better than Faalele at right guard. But these are all young players, and they had their ups and downs, and all of that. So I don't think anything drastically changed based on what we saw on the O-line. I think it's still, what we've been talking about. They're working their way through it. I think McCary is the higher floor play at right tackle, but I think they'd love it if Rosengarten could win that job sooner than later. I think he will be the right tackle at some point in 2024, even if it's not week 1. Faalele at right guard, I mean, there was good and bad. I still, the eyeball test is he's so big and he doesn't move the way that you typically think a right guard needs to move with their feet. But I don't know. John Harbaugh, when I asked him about it on Sunday, believe me, I can read John Harbaugh's coach speak probably better than most people.
My God. Between you and me, if we were in a room with him, we would know he's lying every time he lies, and we would know when he's being honest or trying to be honest.
Right.
I mean, I haven't been in a room with him in 2 years, and I sit here and watch it on video now. It's a bigger tell when you're not in the room with him if you know him a little bit, and I know him a lot of bit.
Well, and whether it's us or anyone else that's covered John Harbaugh for 16 years now, I think he was pretty effusive in his praise for Faalele. I'm not buying that, but I'm buying that they saw enough positive that they're going to continue working him at right guard. And I think they're still, for whatever reason, they're just not big believers in Ben Cleveland to be the right guard. But He was complimentary of Ben Cleveland playing center on Friday night. I think he's a backup option there. To me, Ben Cleveland solidified his roster spot, if nothing else. Maybe he's still in the mix at right guard. We'll see. But
Okay,
that,
so right now, lights on. I asked you this last week. Here we go. Who's on the field? I mean, we're 3 weeks out now. It's the
yeah.
5th of September. Who's on the field?
I mean, obviously Stanley at left tackle, obviously Linderbaum at center, assuming Linderbaum's healthy. And this soft tissue, I don't know if it's neck or something like that. I mean, they're slow playing him. They're trying to avoid him with contact, and that's fine. Voorhees is going to be the left guard. Voorhees was up and down on Friday night upon some review. I think there was some mixed opinions on how he did.
Sometime last week, you admitted that out loud. You said he'll be the left guard.
Yeah, I think he's going to be the left guard.
And that was one of the bigger questions 4 months ago, right?
Well, and let's be clear, that doesn't mean I think I'm necessarily confident he's going to be great or even good there. But of their options, I think he's the guy to start.
He's the one they're going to give the chance to.
Yeah, yes. He's going to get the ball, and you're going to see if he runs with it. Right guard and right tackle, I'm still not sure. I'm probably leaning a little more towards Fa'alele at right guard based on this practice week. And I think it'll be telling if he starts at right guard against Atlanta, back-to-back starts there, and Ben Cleveland still isn't in the mix at right guard. I'm guessing it's probably going to be him. Now, am I confident it's going to be him for all 17 games or anything like that? No. But I feel like maybe it's starting to trend. Maybe I'm starting to believe that a little more based on what we saw on Friday night. Because, Cleveland played center and then he was out. Like, to me, like if Cleveland was really in the mix at right guard, he would have played some right guard then, but he didn't. He played center and then he was done. And right tackle, a week ago, I think I said McCary to you. That's still a coin flip for me. I don't think they're ready to just hand it to Rosengarten, but he's starting to make his push though. He's getting more and more reps in practice. We saw him rotate with McCary in the game. So, if you told me right now Rosengarten starts week 1, I wouldn't be surprised. But if you told me it's McCary, I wouldn't be surprised by that because I still think, there's still something to be said when you talk about young guys. We've talked about this a lot with Orioles prospects over the last couple of years, right? There's something to be said to start conservative, and then you can put them in the starting lineup rather than put them out there when they're not quite ready and then needing to bench them. And I don't think that ruins a player. I don't buy that either.
Well, it didn't ruin Jackson Holiday, and we hope it doesn't ruin Kobe Mayo. But there is a point where you want to give them a chance to compete, not put them out there underwater knowing they're going to get beat or make mistakes.
Right, exactly. So that's
especially not against the Chiefs in week 1 on the road.
Right, exactly. So that's where, if you tell me that McCary still gets the nod, I'm not going to be surprised, or I'm not going to criticize that even if Rosengarten takes over in week 3, let's say.
Or if Rosengarten's out there in the third set of downs in the second quarter doing a shift. Because they've done that here. That's what they do that in the secondary, and they do that with rotation all the time. We just don't think of the offensive line as being a place you want to rotate.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think, especially after what happened last year. Now, that was out of necessity because Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses weren't 100% healthy. But it really lends itself to maybe that's what we end up seeing early in the year. McCary starts, he's the vet, but then Rosengarten, whether it's every other series, every 2 series, every 3 series, however you want to do it, I definitely could see that being how they start the year. And then that gives you an opportunity that McCary can still work at other positions. If someone else gets hurt, he moves to center, moves to left tackle, whatever, however it plays out. And then you're in a position where, you're not locking McCary into right tackle. And then suddenly if someone gets hurt, then you're putting a lesser backup at another spot because McCary's your right tackle. So, I could still see that. So, point is, offensive line, did we find any answers on Friday night? Not really. Again, maybe Fa'alele, maybe after seeing that, it looked okay. I didn't love it, but he wasn't bad there. So, we're just, to me, you're kicking the can down the road another week. You're evaluating. So, that kind of covers the offense. Defensively, nothing about the defensive line. I mean, the mainstays, your top 5. Travis Jones played sparingly. Urban played sparingly. Matabike didn't play. Broderick Washington, was fine. I want to see more from him overall than what we saw last year. But, he's not going to play as much if he doesn't play well. I mean, we saw that last year. Michael Pierce sat out. Linebacker, yeah, this was surprising. Other than Wiggins, probably my biggest surprise on the defensive side was how much Trenton Simpson ended up playing. Now, Chris Board got a concussion, and that impacted their rotation as far as because we know you can't just play 11 guys on defense, for 60 minutes. I mean, even in a preseason game, you got to do a little bit of rotating and all that to keep everyone fresh, and you don't want to get anyone hurt. But Simpson ended up playing into the deep into the third quarter, and I was a little surprised by that. I think overall good. Did have some bad run fits. I mean, he even said as much himself, and I went back and rewatched the game. And yeah, there were some times where he was out of position, and Philadelphia was able to pop some runs. But I think the fact that he played as much as he did, and he played, I think it was 62 snaps, which if you had asked me going into the night, I would have thought, okay, maybe he plays half the game, 35.
Well, I wouldn't think you'll play 62 snaps on September 5th, right?
I mean, to TBD, right? I mean, a lot of it depends on how much sub package they're using, all that. I think that's a very legitimate point there. But I think part of that is he played so little last year, and I think there's probably a message that they want to deliver. One, they want him to get reps. Two, he handled the green dot, so he was getting the calls from Zach Orr because Roquan Smith didn't play, obviously. So an experience for him doing that. And I think there's probably a little bit of a message to a second-year player who's talented but really, really young that you're not just handing him the job. Make no mistake, there's been no evidence whatsoever all spring and all summer that there's any competition there. Trenton Simpson's going to be the weak side inside linebacker. Whether he's playing 3 downs or not, he's going to be out there on the field for at least 2/3 of the time. Maybe they'll go more dime and do what they did a few years ago with and have Kyle Hamilton play some dime linebacker. But I think with Simpson, there was probably a combination of variables there. Is he going to play as much these next 2 games? We'll see. But I thought he handled that pretty well overall. Outside linebacker, they just didn't have guys out there. I mean, I would have liked to see more from Tavius Robinson, but they had Joe Evans, who's an undrafted rookie. He played 68 snaps on the edge. Didn't show anything that tells you he's going to make the team, but he was just out there because they didn't have many guys. And they had CJ Ravenel, who's more of a 5 technique defensive end who, I think has a good chance to be on the practice squad. He was playing edge. So they need to, they need to get Adisa Isaac on the field, who, is finally back practicing after a hamstring that limited him all spring. And they need to get Ajabo cleared for live game snaps because they've got to develop these guys because it can't just be Owe and Van Noy. Those guys are going to run out of gas if they have to play 60 plus snaps a game. So they've got to find some depth there. And there was really nothing that jumped out at the edge on Friday night. Secondary, I thought Ardarius Washington played well. I thought Demarion Williams played well. We already mentioned Wiggins. Jalen Armour-Davis is probably their number 4 outside corner. He didn't have a great showing, but he's had a pretty good spring and summer. So
see, when I hear it literally, given where Humphrey is, given where Wiggins is, given what injuries happen to these guys when the other teams, Derrick Henry runs them over or what would happen, leg injuries, things that just hamper speed in any way. Those guys don't have to be banged up to not be able to play at that level. When I hear number 4 becomes number 3 pretty quick. It becomes number 2, So sure. The depth of it to me is the story. You wrote several seasons. It feels like you spent the first decade here talking about the secondary and the depth of the secondary. It's the thing to watch after the offensive line for me because I don't think you can learn anything about the pass rush during this time of the year.
Well, I just don't know how much you're going to get out of it. And that's with the way they play. The way they produce pressure, they scheme pressure. I mean, they did that last year. They didn't lead the NFL in sacks last year because they had the best standalone man-on-man 4-man front. They schemed it. Now, Matabike's tremendous, and Clowney was really good for them last year, but a lot of it was scheme driven, right? I mean, the simulated pressures, all that, and they'll continue to do that. We saw that Zach Orr blitzing from the nickel. with Demarion Williams at one point, and he got a sack. They had Daryl Worley did it and knocked down a
Yeah,
pass.
to your point, it's not flat out great football players. It's putting football players in positions to make a play.
Yeah,
And I guess that
you need both.
it takes a period of time to say that, but they're all capable of making a play. But very few of them are capable. Maybe Matabike has some special ability physically.
He does.
And Roquan Smith would have some special, but not on every play. And part of their special ability is being at the alignment assignment technique and taking advantage of, if they have to beat one guy in front of them, they can do that. The idea is to not have to make them beat a guy in front of them. The idea is to be smarter and put an extra head on the ball and having somebody out unblocked, making a play or shedding blocks to make plays. To your point, it's not all about mano y mano. We're going to make this happen because we have better football players. They have pretty good football players on the other side, especially the Bengals, and the Browns have really good position play. The teams we play against, it's not that we always have the better football players. But maybe this brings me to my point about Mahomes and the pass rush. And I was a little flippant, like, I don't care about the pass rush in these games. You're probably not going to get the Mahomes much on September 5th anyway. They play a style where you're not sacking him 6-7. You're not going to show off. You're going to try to scheme up ways to neutralize that, because he's going to get rid of the ball before, Matabike is going to get to him, but certainly wherever Van Noy or whatever, first down, second down, the kind of packages you're going to put in there, they're not going to be in 3rd and 16 with Patrick Mahomes running for his life the way let's hope the Raiders are the following week, right? Like, it's going to be a different kind of way you play it against Patrick Mahomes, which is the only thing we're going to be paying attention to the next 3 weeks is how do you beat him? It's not having the greatest pass rush in the world and thinking you're going to get to him, because I don't think that's the game 3 weeks from now.
Well, and that's, I mean, historically, he's killed the blitz. So you've got to approach it differently. I think with Patrick Mahomes, and I think this really applies for how the Ravens want to play in general. For me, it really starts with the back end moving forward. And I think what you do is you have different looks. And you mentioned the secondary. They built, for as much as I was concerned about the depth in their secondary in March and April, I think when you've added a Wiggins, when you've added an Eddie Jackson at safety, when we'll see about TJ Tampa, the 4th round pick, he had sports hernia surgery. Can he be a factor as a number 4, number 5 corner that you hope you don't have to play, but if you're in that position and he has to play, can he be okay for you? We'll see. But they've got depth.
Well, that's what they were with Brandon Stevens 2 years ago.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. I mean, Jalen Armour-Davis might be that guy this year. To your point, he's their number 4 outside corner now. Because you have Humphrey and Stevens as your starters. Wiggins is going to be a factor in some way.
Part of 4 is he's 4 up from 6 because they feel like they've made him better, and that's the hardball system. That's the Costa system, right?
And I would also say with Armour-Davis, I think he's always talent-wise been a 4. He's got to stay on the field, though. He's had injuries the last couple of years. That's been the big problem with him. But the point I was making about their defense philosophy, how it pertains to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, to me, it really starts in the back end of the defense with showing different looks, hiding your coverage, rolling your coverage, doing things pre-snap and then looking like something else after the snap. All of that forces Patrick Mahomes to do what? Hold the ball an extra second, an extra half second to process. And look, Patrick Mahomes will still beat you sometimes, right? And we saw this. If someone had told you that Kansas City would only score 17 points in the AFC Championship game going into that game, you would have said the Ravens are going to the Super Bowl, right? So again, ultimately,
you get me the wrong week on that, because I would have told you if you scored 2 runs or 3 runs against the Rangers, you beat them in the playoffs.
You never know, right? I mean,
yeah.
But the point is, more often than not, if you hold Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs to 17, you're feeling really good about beating them.
I would tell you right now, if they hold them to 17 on September 5th, I'll take
They'll
the Ravens.
Probably beat them. Sure. I would agree with you on that. That doesn't mean they're going to do it again, but they'll try. But
they'll run the ball at least 4 times.
But so much of what they do is just about deception. I mean, it really is. And, you're going to see, obviously, Seattle's going to do this with Mike McDonald being there. and we'll see what their defense looks
Well,
like, and
that
we'll
was
see what.
Rex's game from his old man. That's in the
And
roots of
right,
everything they did here was having players really smart. Going back to that '06 defense that was phenomenal we had here, and when Billick was still coaching the team, back to '01 and Marvin, it's just sort of like they're not going to know what we're going to do, and when
right,
we do it, we're going to do it, and we're going to confuse their quarterback. 80% of the quarterbacks in the league at any point over the last 30 years can be confused. It's the 20% that were usually a little better at the line
sure,
of scrimmage. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Roethlisberger when necessary, that made it a little more difficult. But this defense is feasted against bad quarterbacks and will again and will again.
yeah.
Nine to 11 of these games this year will be against bad quarterbacks, depending on who's injured and who's not. And it's in those 6 or 7 games that this makes all the difference in the world in that communication level. That's how they almost beat the Chiefs. That's how they held them 17 last year because they're really
Yeah.
good at it. They're really
Well,
good.
and I think the difference, and you made a good point because you're kind of talking about the Rex Ryan era as far as what the Ravens defense was then. Obviously, Wink Martindale was someone who had ties to the Ryan family, but what we've seen since transitioning from Martindale to Mike McDonald, and I think what you're going to see continue with Zach Orr, is still using the deception, still doing all the pre-snap stuff, those amoeba fronts where you have 7 or 8 guys at the line of scrimmage and you don't know if everyone's coming, everyone's dropping into coverage. Chances most of the time it's a few of them are going to drop and then you might have a 4-man rush, but you don't know which 4 it is. But the
What would
difference,
Don Shula and Tom Landry make of this, right?
right?
Like literally
Oh, I mean
Lombardi.
it's all about innovation. I mean, but what we've seen, and this is where the Ravens have adjusted under Rex Ryan, under Wink Martindale. They really leaned on their corners to do a whole lot more of playing on an island and playing a lot more man and single high and all those types of things, which was awesome when you got to the quarterback. But when your pressure and the things you did up front didn't work, which it's not going to work 100% of the time, it left you vulnerable to giving up big plays. What we've seen now is they've kind of moved to like a little bit of a hybrid where, yeah, they're still going to blitz and still pick their spots to be more aggressive. But now it's more like the sim pressures and the pre-snap deception, but you still drop into too high coverage. Now it might not be the 2 safeties. It might be one of the safeties, one of the other safeties comes up like Kyle Hamilton, and one of your corners drops into deep half of the field. But they play a little more conservative, a little more zone on the back end, but they do that with deception and pre-snap movement and rolling coverage and changing things up and just really trying to confuse you. But they leave themselves more outs on the back end so that if you don't get to Patrick Mahomes with him holding the ball an extra half second, the chances are he's not going to torch you for a 60-yard touchdown. It might be, okay, he might move the chains. He might move, get a first down, but it's not going to break your back in that spot. So I think that's where you've seen the transition with how they play defense. And I think that's going to continue. I'm fascinated to see how Nate Wiggins is going to be acclimated, incorporated in this offense. I mean, Humphrey and Stevens are going to start the year as the outside corners, but what we saw from Wiggins on Friday night was just an example of, this kid's going to play. He's going to play sooner than later. I don't think he's going to play every snap, but he's going to be in the mix, especially now with Arthur Millette hurt and not having that more conventional nickel that you feel good
When's he
about.
back,
So
Millette?
Late September, probably, maybe early October. I mean, had the knee scoped. It's not a season-ending thing, but
It's a weapon you want against Mahomes.
You'd like to have him, sure. But I'd also say if there's one spot that they have some wiggle room, Kyle Hamilton plays nickel, Marlon Humphrey can play nickel. Ardarius Washington, we forget, started the year as the nickel last year before he got hurt. Demarion Williams, I'm not ready to say I have confidence in him, but he's another guy that plays nickel. So they've got some different options there and some different looks. And I don't think they want, like let's be clear, I don't think they're by design, they want Arthur Millette to be the exclusive nickel. I think they want an ensemble cast playing the nickel because it all depends. If Travis Kelce is lining up in the slot as he's apt to do for Kansas City, then you want Kyle Hamilton covering him, not Arthur Millette. So, that's where it makes sense for him. Other times where it's a more physical receiver, you might want Marlon Humphrey there. If it's a more traditional, smaller slot receiver, then yeah, Arthur Millette or Ardarius Washington makes more sense there. So, they've talked about this a lot, and I started talking to you about this. This was something that became a buzz term in the football analytics community, 5, 6, 7 years ago. But positionless defense on the back end, and what that means is yes, you're going to have 4 defensive backs or 5 defensive backs or 6 defensive backs, but you don't want to just fit everyone into, this specialized role, and that's what they do. And they're the outside corner on the right side of the field, and then your corner on the other side is the boundary corner, and you've got a traditional nickel, and you've got a free safety and a strong safety. No, they want those to be interchangeable parts where, Kyle Hamilton's a perfect example of this. We see Kyle Hamilton play either safety spot. We see Kyle Hamilton play nickel. We've seen Kyle Hamilton play linebacker. We've seen Kyle Hamilton rush from the edge. I mean, he literally can play 6 different spots. Now, can everyone do that? No, but other guys on your defense can play 2 or 3 different spots on any given play. So again, so much of this is about what? Confusing the quarterback and forcing them to hold the ball. And then in turn, that allows your pass rush, which isn't the most dominant one-on-one 4-man conventional front if you try to play that way.
But if you confuse a fullback or confuse a tight end,
or
right?
just the quarterback holds the ball, yes, eventually you'll get there, or you'll force an incompletion. So, it's very much a collective defense, and that's not going to change. I mean, that was the case last year. Yes, Kyle Hamilton's an All-Pro. Yes, Justin Madubuike was amazing last year. Yes, Roquan Smith is a first-team All-Pro. And yes, they have some other guys on that defense who have been Pro Bowl players in the past, like Marlon Humphrey. But it really is, by design, intended to be that the sum is greater than the parts, right? And I think that's how you have a defense that led the league in sacks last year. When you can go back, and anyone can go back right now to our website and go and pull up conversations from you and me last August, and we talked about it over and over. What about the pass rush? What about the pass rush? And they led the league in sacks. Now, Clowney and Van Noy coming in had a big part to do with that, but it's still, they'd be the first to tell you the Ravens scheme had so much to do with that. And I think they're confident once again, even with some of their personnel losses that they endured this offseason, that they're going to remain an elite defense. Do I think they're going to lead the league in sacks, points allowed, and turnovers again? That Triple Crown thing they did last year? No, I don't, because I think it's extremely difficult to do something like that again. But I fully expect this defense to be a top 5 defense again. And yeah, they don't have quite as much depth at some of these positions as they did a year ago. And that's, I'm a little concerned about the edge rush, outside linebacker. I am. But at the same time, they have depth at other spots. And I do think Zach Orr, there'll be some hiccups. There'll be some growing pains early on. There were with Mike McDonald 2 years ago. But I think Zach Orr is going to be, I think he's going to be perfectly fine. And again, so much of this is institutional knowledge. This is a Ravens system that's going to continue and carry on. And, you still have a lot of good football players, and you have elite talent at each level. You do that, that all adds up to, assuming you stay relatively healthy, what should be a really good defense, especially as the year goes on.
$600 million of our taxpayer money to move the media up into the corner. How's the Black Wing? Did you get to see the Black Wing, or no? You'll never go to the Black Wing.
I walked by the old media entrance that is now the Black Wing entrance, and yeah, everyone looked excited to be there. But yeah, a little bit of a long distance view compared to what it used to be, but we'll adjust. I'll upgrade my pair of binoculars that I've been using. I need to upgrade those, but it'll be okay. Still can see the field, and what was a pretty forgettable preseason game on Friday night, as most of them are, if we're being honest.
I'm writing letters to current management and ownership of the 2 sports teams in a few weeks, and this is a point where if David Modell were still alive, I could joke with him and say, those victory arches did not produce a victory last weekend. So, the media now sits, just let everybody know that you're sitting under the victory arches that Roy Summerhoff once came onto my airwaves 28 years ago and talked about personal seat licenses and poor suckers licenses and all that stuff. So part of the original marketing was Victory Arches. So we got to get that right. Luke Jones will be under the big W. There's an old movie reference for you. It's a wild, 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 wild world, wacky, wacky world, whatever that one was with Phil Silvers in it. Under the big W. So we'll try to get a big W. Harbaugh didn't take it too bad though. Like he doesn't lose in August much, right?
Well, they've lost 3 preseason games in a row now. So like suddenly they had the long winning streak, and no, it doesn't matter. It's fine. One last thing I just wanted to add, because it was the one thing from the game that I didn't touch. I went through all the position groups. I think I gave you more than a thumbnail on each position group and observations, but I felt bad for Emory Jones. I mean, he's their 4th string quarterback, came into the game at the very end of regulation, and he fumbles the ball. I mean, 4th stringers, they're not guaranteed to even get preseason minutes. He's obviously not making the team. That might be his only shot to play in a preseason game, and he gets stripped of the ball, and it leads to the Eagles kicking a field goal. So I felt bad for him for a moment. I mean,
it's kind of like when Meatloaf gave me a chance to sing "Paradise by the Dashboard Light." I had one chance.
Yeah.
I had one chance, and I didn't get it right. I screwed it.
Right. So I felt bad for him, but it's who cares? I mean, that Nate Wiggins is okay and is only going to miss a little bit of time with the shoulder. It's not something that's going to keep him out week 1. Beyond that, nothing else of consequence. Even the O-line stuff, which is important, and they still need to figure that out. Those preseason games, as we have explained over and over and over, those are just parts of the entire evaluation. Those are snapshots. Those games, do they hold a little more weight than maybe one practice might? Maybe.
Boy, nobody wants to come to these games either, do they?
Yeah. Oh, sure. I mean,
it used to be. I mean, but people used to go a little bit more. It's really.
I will give you. I wrote this at BaltimorePositive.com. I've shared this with people in the organization. Not anyone that has any clout to actually make a change at the league level.
Well, be careful. If you share too much, they'll take your press pass. I mean that. That's true.
I will say this. I think what the NFL should do with the preseason games, and obviously at some point, whether it's 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, they're going to 18 games. We know that. It's just a matter of when. So presumably at that point, they'll go to 2 preseason games. What I would do, because we have seen all these teams as a result of not playing their starters anymore, they do what? Joint practices. So what I would do for preseason games, I would rebrand them as preseason events, or just call it a preseason exhibition.
Scrimmage.
What I would do a controlled scrimmage for my starters. That way, everyone gets to see Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. You can put them in their game uniform. Now, quarterbacks you'd want to put in red because you're not going to hit the quarterback. So you do that. But you get to see them. You get to see them make plays and run around and throw passes, all that. Controlled scrimmage for the starters, and then do a 30-minute game for any players that you want to give live game action.
Can I say something out loud that I've said a million times? And Chad Steele knows this. I hated going out to Westminster. I hated it more when they put it in the building out there from a just kids screaming on it's and they're trying to get work done, and we're trying to like figure things out and get to know some players, which they don't want us to know the players, which was the whole purpose of being there to some degree, because you're disseminating very little, as we pointed out with stats for interceptions in July for 3rd string quarter. It's nuts. But you would say from an experiential standpoint, and I know your private and public feelings about you get there before the fans, you don't hit the traffic and all the stuff that made Westminster a little bit fun but awful. But I did get some good pancakes out of it when I was in Westminster. The practices are so much more fun to go to than to go to the game, right? That would be your point, right? Like all of these practices, at least if Lamar shows up, signs autographs. If he just shows up and signs autographs, it's better than whatever Friday night was. Like the rethinking of you being out at these practices 20 times and seeing a couple thousand people. What do they have out there? They have 2,000 people a day?
About 1,000, I think, is the most they can do.
So 1,000 people, whatever it is,
it's an atmosphere.
Whatever it is, there's a vibe to it, and an exclusivity, which Mr. Bishotti loves exclusivity, because they're inclusive. They're DEI, except they're E. The E is exclusive, not inclusive. Ask anybody who makes it into the Black Wing. But to your point, to have that kind of an event where people get something when they show up
Sure.
instead of whatever Friday was, which is, by the way, tell the nice lunch ladies, and this is a good plug for Wise Markets, that my favorite thing of preseason, other than Thelma and Louise 25 years ago and making it interesting up in 513 when we all used to go to the preseason games, was the gold watermelon that we used to get in the press box. I would not know
Oh,
about
yeah.
gold watermelon if it weren't for Ravens preseason games. So please tell the beautiful women who were always the best part of my Raven experience were the people. The food's terrible in general. That's not their fault. They were always the nicest people in the entire stadium ever. I miss them and I miss their gold watermelon, but I did get my own gold watermelon at Wise this week. My wife picked it up. So I have that. But I mean, the experience of preseason, I don't miss that, dude. You know that. I
Yeah.
walked 6 blocks to go to the games and I would get over there and say, what, like,
Yeah.
it's just, and that's when they played some of the guys. Like
Right.
this whole thing's a mess. It really is.
Well,
And
and
and from the optics of Chad Steele thinking he's a brand manager, as he espoused to me, so manage the brand. Fix this. This is you've made everything else awesome about everything else. This is the one thing they've never really been able to figure out.
well, and I just think, and look, a critic, someone in opposition to what I just posed would say, well, the Chiefs are playing their starters. Well, Marquise Brown got hurt and looks like he's probably not going to be ready week 1. And that already they're losing a player that will matter going up against the Ravens
By
defense.
the way, they
But
compared it to a car crash. Wow.
yeah, well, Tyreek Hill had the same thing like 5 years ago, I want to say, when he was still in Kansas City, and he missed close to a month. So I mean, it's one of those, they say it's one of those injuries that it will heal and be fine, but it's one of those injuries that if you misdiagnose it right off the bat, it can really be a problem. So sounds like he got good medical care and all that. So good for him. I have no ill will towards Hollywood Brown. I think, he was amongst their first round picks, was better than some others. But anyway, back to the preseason proposal. If you would just move it to the structure that I posed, which is you do a controlled scrimmage for your starters. It allows you to have a joint practice right in the stadium, right when you're having this fake game that no one's going to anymore because people, the gig is up. Everyone knows that the Ravens don't play their starters anymore, and you're not going to see Lamar Jackson. You're lucky if he's even going to go through warmups, let alone if he's going to play. So instead, you open up your stadium, you sell tickets, and at the very least, you can say, you know what? Assuming Lamar Jackson didn't tweak his ankle the day before or something like that, he's going to scrimmage, because in these joint practices, these coaches love getting that work against another team, but it's a controlled environment. So you minimize, you don't eliminate, you never eliminate, but you minimize the injury risk, and you still allow your fans to see Lamar or to see Jalen Hurts on the other side. We didn't see him in Friday night's game, one of the better quarterbacks in football. So you do that. It becomes something of more value for your starting players and your coaching staff. And then you still do the 30-minute game. If you want to see what the young guys look like in an uncontrolled game environment, you can still do that. So to me, that makes sense. You can incorporate some autographs in that with young fans, and kind of make it a hybrid training camp practice / this fake preseason game that has outlived its usefulness from an entertainment standpoint. Let's say there's still value to evaluate the young players. That's why I said you can still do a 30-minute game, have them play a half, but then have your starters do a controlled scrimmage where there's some competition. Yes, you can protect your quarterback. Yes, you can protect players from tackling all the way to the ground. But I think that would make so much more sense moving forward for the NFL with these preseason games. You just rebrand them as preseason events, preseason showcase events featuring the Baltimore Ravens and the Philadelphia Eagles. There you go. Sell tickets to it. You can add some charity elements to it, and it'll be so much better. I'm not saying it'll be great. It's not the same as a regular season game. You're never replicating that because there are no stakes to it. But I think it would be so much more productive for the teams themselves, and certainly a product that would be more entertaining. To me, it's a no-brainer to do it. Will they do it? Probably not. But I just, these 60-minute preseason games at this point, these 3-hour preseason games, you don't need that much evaluation for only the young guys. So let's add a scrimmage element to it, and put a little more value back into these if you're going to continue to charge folks to go to these games and get a lousy product in the process.
Luke's working hard for the money all week long. He is Baltimore Luke out on the interwebs. He will be in Owings Mills. He will be downtown. Orioles at home taking on the Nationals. He can only be in one place at one time, and I don't really exist as a media member, so we'll be covering whatever he can cover this week. I'm going to be down at Mako in Ocean City chatting with our senators and our leaders and electeds and lots of business leaders as well, doing what I call Baltimore Positive. Stay with us.